September the 3rd, 2008, DeWitt, Nebraska. The heavy stamp presses are dead quiet. 330 people stand on a concrete floor that smells of hot iron, cutting oil, and 84 years of sweat. A corporate executive from a holding company in Atlanta stands at the front of the room. He does not look the workers in the eye. He holds a single sheet of printed paper. He clears his throat. He tells them it is over. The factory is closing. The tools will be manufactured in China from now on. The room does not explode in anger. It goes entirely silent. Nobody shouts. Nobody cries. They just stare at the man who is erasing their town. The people listening do not just work in this building. They built it. Their fathers built it. Their grandfathers forged the steel that paid for the streets outside. And the man holding the paper is shutting it down to save a few pennies on a piece of cold rolled steel. This was not just another hardware company. William Petersen was a Danish immigrant who wanted a tool that would not let go. He built a pair of locking pliers so relentlessly strong they could crush a steel pipe before they would slip. He built a family empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He built a legacy that defined American manufacturing. And then his descendants watched it get swallowed by a corporate conglomerate that traded nearly a century of trust for a temporary bump in quarterly earnings. This is the story of how corporate greed destroyed America's most famous tool, from a dirt floor blacksmith shop to global dominance to a locked gate in a dying Midwestern town. This is the anatomy of a corporate betrayal. But here is what nobody talks about. The executives who closed the DeWitt plant knew the quality was going to drop. They saw the early test models from the overseas factories. The steel was softer, the teeth stripped faster, the locking mechanism jammed under pressure, and they made the move anyway, not because they had to survive a crisis, because they thought you would not notice the difference. William Petersen had nothing. He was born in Denmark in 1889. He immigrated to the United States and found his way to the flat, unforgiving plains of Nebraska. He was a man who understood heat and force and friction. He opened a blacksmith shop in the tiny town of DeWitt. His daily routine was brutal. He woke at 4 in the morning. He lit the forge before the sun came up. He hauled coal. He swung a heavy hammer until his shoulders burned. He had calluses on his hands thick enough to stop a wood carving knife. He trusted iron. He feared nothing except bad craftsmanship. He wanted to build something that lasted forever, but he was trapped in an industry that had not evolved in a century. In the American Midwest in the early 1920s, metalworking was a dangerous, exhausting game. A blacksmith needed an anvil, a hammer, a piece of raw iron, and a pair of tongs. The tongs were the weak link. To understand why, you have to understand the physics of hot metal. When you heat a piece of iron to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, it glows orange. It radiates heat that singes the hair off your arms. You have to pull that boiling iron out of the fire with your tongs. You have to lay it on the anvil, and then you have to hold it perfectly still with your left hand while you strike it with a heavy hammer in your right hand. Tongs do not lock. The only thing keeping that 2000-degree piece of iron from flying across the room is the crushing grip strength of your left hand. It requires constant, punishing physical pressure. If your hand cramps, your grip slips. If your grip slips, the boiling hot metal falls on your leather apron, or your boots, or the wooden floor. If the metal falls, you lose the heat. You have to start over. For centuries, blacksmiths just accepted this. It was slow. It was dangerous. It was exhausting. They lived with burned arms and crushed fingers. That was the world William Petersen was standing in every single morning. The opportunity. Every single metal worker, mechanic, and farmer in the world had the same problem. They needed a third hand. They needed the crushing, immovable power of a cast-iron bench vise, but they needed it to be portable enough to hold in one hand while moving around a hot forge. The insight. William Petersen asked a different question. What if the human hand did not have to provide the continuous pressure? What if the tool did the holding for you? What if the tool locked itself to the metal using mechanical leverage so the human hand could finally let go? The execution. He started carving models out of wood. He took the basic shape of an ordinary pair of pliers, but he completely redesigned the mechanics. He added a threaded screw mechanism to the bottom handle. He built a toggle link inside the grip. This is a simple but brilliant piece of physics called an over-center mechanism. You turn the screw to set the exact width of the jaws. You place the jaws over the metal. You squeeze the handles together. The toggle link pushes forward. The resistance increases until the link snaps past its center point. The moment it crosses that invisible line, the tool locks in place with over 1 ton of crushing force. The handles will not open until you pull a release lever. The result? He called it the Vise-Grip. He filed for a patent, which was granted on April 8, 1924. It gave a single worker the power of a mechanical bench vise in a tool that fit in the back pocket of a pair of canvas overalls. A blacksmith could now hold boiling iron with 0 physical effort. A farmer could clamp 2 broken pieces of a tractor together while he welded them. Productivity did not just improve, it doubled overnight. The problem it created: nobody knew what the hell it was. Hardware stores looked at this strange, complicated contraption and refused to stock it. They said it looked too heavy. They said it was too expensive. A standard pair of pliers cost a few pennies. Petersen wanted to charge $1.25. In 2024 money, that is about $22. Hardware distributors laughed him out of their offices. William Petersen had a revolutionary invention, an approved United States patent, and absolutely 0 customers. What happened next shocked everyone who knew him. He did not go back to the forge. He did not accept defeat. He put 50 Vise-Grips in the trunk of his car. He drove out of DeWitt and headed straight for the local farms. He walked right up to mechanics, tractor repairmen, and independent welders. He did not give them a sales pitch. He walked up to a workbench, clamped his Vise-Grip onto a thick piece of solid steel, and told the mechanic to try and pull it off. They pulled. They twisted. They sweated. They could not move it. Then Petersen would casually reach over, flick the release lever, and the tool would drop into his hand. Every single man who saw that demonstration reached into his wallet. He sold out of his entire inventory in a single week. William Petersen opened a small manufacturing plant in DeWitt. He hired his neighbors. He hired his friends. He bought stamping presses and heat treatment ovens. He began turning raw American steel into locking pliers. Growth was slow but steady. And then the Great Depression hit. The stock market collapsed in 1929. The banks failed. The farms across the Midwest dried up and blew away in the Dust Bowl. People did not have money for food, let alone expensive hand tools. Factories across the country boarded up their windows and fired their workers. But William Petersen refused to fire his people. He knew the families in DeWitt. He went to church with them. He knew that if he closed the factory, the town would starve. He kept the machines running. He stockpiled inventory he could not sell. When a farmer needed a Vise-Grip to fix a broken plow but had no money, Petersen just gave it to him. He traded tools for chickens, for vegetables, for whatever people could spare. He bet his entire company on the belief that if he took care of his people and his product during the darkest economic collapse in American history, they would take care of him when the light returned. And on this date, everything changed. But to understand how, we need to go back 6 months. It is 1939. World War II is beginning in Europe. The British aviation industry is frantically building aeroplanes to defend the skies over London from the German Luftwaffe. Building a bomber aeroplane requires driving hundreds of thousands of aluminum rivets into sheet metal. You have to hold the curved metal panels perfectly flush, with absolute millimeter precision, while a pneumatic hammer drives the rivet home. Ordinary clamps are entirely too slow. Regular pliers slip and scratch the aluminum. A British aviation engineer discovers the Vise-Grip. It is the exact perfect tool for the job. You set the screw once, and you can lock and unlock the tool on every single rivet in 3 seconds flat. The British government orders tens of thousands of Vise-Grips. Suddenly, the little factory in DeWitt is running day and night. Then on December the 7th, 1941, the United States enters the war. The American Defense Department realizes they need the exact same tool. The manufacturing scale becomes unimaginable. Liberty ships are built in naval yards using Vise-Grips to hold the hull plating. Sherman tanks are assembled using Vise-Grips. Jeeps are repaired on the muddy battlefields of France and Germany using Vise-Grips. The tool becomes a classified, vital piece of the global Allied war effort. The town of DeWitt completely transforms. The Petersen factory expands from a small brick shop to a massive, sprawling industrial complex. Hundreds of men and women work 3 shifts a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are not just making hardware anymore, they are making the very things that will win the war. Production skyrockets to over 1 million units a year. And this is the detail that nobody in the history books mentions. William Petersen never stopped walking the factory floor. He was a millionaire now. He was a major defense contractor. But he still wore heavy leather work boots. He still checked the steel temper himself. Every morning at 5 a.m., he walked the line. He pulled hot tools out of the stamping presses and tested the locking action with his own calloused hands. He listened for the exact, specific metallic click the toggle link made when it engaged. If the click sounded hollow, he threw the tool in the scrap bin. He knew the names of the people running the drop presses. He knew their children. He trusted the people of DeWitt, and they trusted him. The war ends. The post-war economic boom begins. Millions of American soldiers come home, buy houses, buy cars, and start fixing things. They all remember the Vise-Grip from the motor pools in Europe. The Vise-Grip becomes the single most recognizable hand tool in the United States. If you opened a heavy steel toolbox in 1955, there was a pair of Vise-Grips inside. If you walked into a mechanic garage in Detroit, there was a pair of Vise-Grips resting on the bench. The Petersen family kept innovating. William passed the company to his sons. They maintained the exact same obsessive standards. They added a quick release lever in 1957 to make opening the jaws easier. They introduced needle nose versions for electricians. They introduced heavy-duty C-clamps for professional welders. By 1960, they were selling millions of tools across 50 different countries. The name Vise-Grip became a generic trademark, like Kleenex or Band-Aid. People stopped saying locking pliers. They just said, "Pass me the Vise-Grips." The steel had to be perfect. The heat treatment had to be exact. The locking mechanism had to snap with a specific, satisfying violence. You did not sell garbage to people who worked with their hands. That was the Petersen rule. But that is not the crazy part. The ultimate threat to this American empire did not come from a rival tool company. It did not come from a foreign competitor inventing a better mechanism. The threat came from the inside. It is 1985. The Petersen family has run the company for over 60 years. They have dominated the market. But managing a massive global manufacturing business with union contracts, international shipping logistics, and raw material supply chains is exhausting. The family decides it is time to step back. They sell Petersen manufacturing to a company called American Tool Companies. For a while, things remain exactly the same. The executives at American tool companies are smart enough to leave the Nebraska factory alone. The DeWitt plant keeps churning out flawless tools. The town survives. The workers keep their jobs. The brand remains untouched. Then comes 2002. Remember this name, Newell Rubbermaid. They buy American tool companies for $414 million. Newell Rubbermaid is not a hardware company. They are a massive, publicly traded, multinational conglomerate. They own Tupperware brands. They own Sharpie markers. They own office supply brands. They do not care about the soul of a wrench. They do not care about the history of a blacksmith in Nebraska who gave tools away during the Great Depression. They care about one thing only: quarterly profit margins, Wall Street earnings reports, shareholder value. Here is where it gets interesting. The executives sit in a glass conference room in Atlanta, Georgia. They open up the balance sheets. They look at the Vise-Grip division. They see a factory in Nebraska paying fair union-negotiated American wages. They see health insurance costs. They see pension plans. Then they look at a spreadsheet for an outsourced manufacturing facility in China. The Chinese factory promises they can make a tool that looks exactly like a Vise-Grip for a fraction of the cost. The executives do not understand metallurgy. They do not see the difference in the carbon-steel alloy. They do not care about the precision of the heat treatment. They only see that moving production overseas will increase their profit margin by 15%. The tension builds. It is 2004. Rumors start circulating in the town of DeWitt. The machines on the factory floor are getting old. The stamp presses are vibrating too much. The corporate holding company is not replacing them. They are patching them up with duct tape and temporary fixes. The workers notice new management suits walking the floor with clipboards. These men do not look at the tools. They time the production lines with stopwatches. They measure the output per second. They ask the foreman how to squeeze 3 more units out of an hour. The workers know exactly what this means. You do not stop investing in a factory unless you are planning to leave it. The executives back in Atlanta make smaller changes first. They try to find cheaper steel suppliers. They try to speed up the heat treatment process, which makes the metal brittle. The workers in DeWitt push back. They tell the management that the quality is dropping. The management ignores them. The priority is no longer making the best tool in the world. The priority is making the most profitable tool in the world. Decision moment. It is the summer of 2008. The global financial crisis is beginning to ripple across the economy. The corporate board of Newell Rubbermaid has 2 choices. Keep production in Nebraska, maintain the legendary quality of the brand, weather the economic storm, and accept a lower profit margin. Or move everything to China, fire the people who built the brand, and secure their executive bonuses. They vote. They choose the margin. Immediate consequence. September the 3rd, 2008. The announcement is made on the factory floor. 330 people lose their jobs. In a town of just over 500 people, this is not a layoff, it is an execution. The town of DeWitt loses over half of its entire tax revenue in a single afternoon. The local diner struggles. The grocery store closes. A community that existed for 84 years to build one perfect piece of physical engineering is left with an empty brick shell surrounded by a chain-link fence. Transition. But the story does not end with a locked gate, because every breakthrough in corporate margins creates a massive vulnerability in the market. You can outsource the labor, you can outsource the steel, but you cannot outsource the reputation. The new Chinese-made tools hit the shelves in 2009. They look exactly like Vise-Grips. They have the familiar blue and yellow cardboard packaging. They have the famous logo stamped on the side. But the mechanics, the pipe fitters, and the farmers notice something immediately. The steel is softer. When a mechanic clamps down on a hardened, rusted bolt under a truck chassis, the teeth of the new Vise-Grip round off and strip out. The metal is inferior. When a welder subjects the tool to intense heat, the locking mechanism jams up and refuses to release. The tool slips. The toggle link bends. For the first time in 84 years, a Vise-Grip fails to grip. The customers revolt. Professional tradesmen flood hardware forums and comment sections with complaints. They return the broken tools to the big box home improvement stores in droves. They feel insulted. They feel betrayed. And the competitors see the blood in the water. Companies like Milwaukee Tool, Knipex, and Malco step straight into the massive gap. They begin building incredibly high-quality, professional-grade locking pliers to replace the broken American legend. Newell Rubbermaid saved their profit margin on paper, but they destroyed the only thing that actually mattered, the unconditional trust of the person holding the tool. Somewhere in America tonight, in a cold detached garage or a professional diesel mechanic shop, a man is digging through the bottom drawer of a scratched red metal toolbox. He pushes past the shiny new ratchets. He ignores the modern wrenches. He reaches for a pair of Vise-Grips that look like they have been through a war. The chrome plating is entirely gone. The steel is a dull, scratched, oxidized grey, but the teeth are still perfectly razor sharp. He squeezes the handles together, and the toggle link snaps shut with a sound like a rifle bolt closing. The side of the tool is stamped with 3 very specific words: Made in USA.